This is section 2.5 of Algebra 1, and this is all about problem solving. So I want you to look at the box at the top of the page, and I'm even going to make this kind of shorter for you. There's a couple of steps to think about when you're solving an equation. First of all, if it's possible, you definitely want to draw a picture. Okay, so number one, if it's possible, draw a picture. Number two, there has to be an equation somehow that you can write, and notice how that's bolded and underlined. That's the most important part of these problems. And then number three is to solve. Now, if I have to keep it to the most basic, I'm going to say picture, equation, and solve. But I do think it's important to think about this last one because it says interpret or check your answer. In other words, does your answer make sense for the problem? You know, have you actually answered the question? Okay, so picture, equation, solve. So I'm going to go back to what we left off in the section 2.4 because really this should be section 2.5. And I'm going to pull in these examples. So we're on page 42. And I'm going to write down those three steps that we just talked about. Let me get this stuff out of my way. So I'm going to write down those three steps that we just talked about for problem solving. We said, number one, if you can, draw a picture. Number two, is there some equation that you can write? And number three, solve. Okay, so let's look at number 10a. Joe Greenthumb can afford enough fencing to enclose a rectangular garden with a perimeter of 140. Okay, so you can kind of see the picture. So they've drawn the picture for me. So here's my rectangle, right? Here's the garden. Here's my rectangle. I've got my four sides. There's my rectangle. And I want the perimeter to be 140. Well, think about it. What does perimeter mean? It means all around the outside equals 140. Okay, if the width of his garden must be 30, and they've written that here, width is 30, find the length. Well, you may remember from a previous example, remember we said that perimeter of a rectangle is 2 of the length, which makes sense because that would be the length on one side and the length on the other side, plus 2 of the width because you have a width on one side and a width on the other side. So that makes sense. You're adding them all up. So let's fill in everything we know. There's my equation. I've got my picture over to the right, and now we fill in everything we know. I know the perimeter is 140, so I'm going to put a 140 in place of P. I'm trying to find the length. I don't know what that is, so I'll just leave my 2L. But then in place of W, I have 30. So I'm going to say plus 2 times 30. And again, I know that a lot of you could probably do this problem just using your calculator without an equation. But the reason we want to write an equation is so that we can get better at, in general, any kind of word problem. So you need to get in the habit of writing equations. Okay, so let's simplify. I've got 140 equals 2L plus 60. Now I'm doing my solving, right? So subtract 60. If I subtract 60, I'm going to get 80 equals 2L. Final step, how am I going to solve for L? Divide by 2. So I'm going to have L equals 40. So I have solved. Okay, I think I'm done. But let's make sure we answered the question. This is that number 4. Did we answer the question? What does it tell me to find? Go read the problem. It says find the length. And isn't that what I've done? I'm saying that the length is 40. Okay, look at 10b. If each 10-foot panel of fencing costs $29.85, how much will it cost to fence the garden? So the idea is when I put up my fence, I'm going to have this one 10-foot panel, then I have another 10-foot panel, then I have another 10-foot panel. So it says, how much will it cost? I'm sorry, each 10-foot panel is $29.85. How much will it cost to fence the entire garden? Well, I know that my perimeter is 140, right? So, how could I figure out how much I need to fence the garden? Well, I need to figure out how many 10-foot panels I'm going to need. Would you agree? So I'm going to say the number of 10-foot panels is going to have to then be multiplied by 29.85, right? I'm trying to think of what we want to call panels instead of P, since P is my perimeter. So let's see, what's the best way that we should write this? Okay, so I'm trying to find the cost. So how about if we say something like cost equals, well, I'm going to need $29.85 times however many fence panels I need, right? So $29.85 times, I don't want to use P, so how about if I say times F for fence panel? Okay, so that means I can find the cost if I know how many fence panels. Well, if I have a total of 140 feet of fencing I'm going to need, right, because that's the entire perimeter, and that's divided into 10-foot panels, then how many panels am I going to need? Wouldn't that be 14? So doesn't that mean I'm going to need 14 fence panels? So the cost is going to equal whatever $29.85 times 14 comes out to be. And so if you use your calculator, let's see, $29.85 times 14. So the cost is going to be $417.90. Okay, did I answer what they were asking? The question was, what's the total cost to fence the garden? And I think that's what I found. Okay, so look at number 10. It says, during the off season, Joe wants to put down sod in his entire garden. Okay, sod are little sections of grass, right? How many square feet of sod will be required? So when you put down sod in your garden, it's kind of like you have one section of grass, and then you put down another section of grass and another section of grass. And so basically, when you put down sod, when you're planting grass, you're trying to cover the entire area of the garden. So we're not talking perimeter anymore, we're talking about area. So the first thing I'm thinking to myself is, okay, I know area equals length times width, right? Okay, so I have an equation, and then I plug in everything I know. Let's see, how many square feet of sod? So we're trying to find A. I don't know what A is, but do I know what L is? Well, sure I do. Look up there at number 10A. Didn't we say L is 40? And do I know what W is? Well, yeah, didn't they tell me up there in the problem that W is 30? So that means A is, do the multiplication, 1,200. Have I answered the question? How many square feet of sod? Yes, there will be 1,200. This is the notation for square feet. Okay. Let's see, I think I'll leave 10D for you for later. We'll talk about that. Let's go on and look at some more kinds of problems. Sometimes, and I think these are the easier ones, you get lucky, and it's not really about an application like a real life application. It's just about numbers. So if you look at number 1, it talks about twice a number added to 7. So there's no picture to draw, but we can write an equation. So it says twice a number. Well, doesn't that mean 2 times the number? So I'll call my number x. 2 times the number added to 7. Added to 7 is, what does the word is mean? Equals. The same is the same as all equals. So is the same, that's all equals, as 3 subtracted from the number. So how do I write 3 subtracted from the number? Wouldn't that be x minus 3? Because that's how you show 3 subtracted. So there's my equation, and now I can just solve, right? Solve for x. Wow, compared to some of the things we've done before, this is an easy solving, right? Subtract x, subtract 7. So I think the number they're looking for is -10. Okay, let's try number 2. Balsa wood sticks, so that's just a certain kind of wood, are commonly used for building models. A 48-inch balsa wood stick. Okay, so here's my 48-inch. So from here to here is 48, right? 48-inch stick is cut into 2 pieces. All right, so I'm going to cut this into 2 pieces. Now, it doesn't say that it's cut evenly or anything like that, so I'm just going to say, hey, I'm going to cut it into 2 pieces. Let's say that's where I cut it. I may not be drawing this to scale. It doesn't matter. And it says It's cut into 2 pieces so that the longer piece, so on my picture, that's going to be the one over here at the right, is 3 times the shorter. Okay, so this is the shorter piece. And the longer piece over here is going to be 3 times whatever that shorter piece is, right? Find the length of each piece. So I need to solve for S. So based on my picture, do you see an equation? Well, I do. Doesn't it seem like if I add the 2 pieces together, if I add the first piece, which is S, plus the second piece, which is 3S, if I add them together, what's the total supposed to be? Doesn't it look like the total is supposed to be 48? Okay, I have an equation. So I drew a picture that helped me come up with an equation, and now I can solve for S. So let's see, S plus 3S, wouldn't that be 4S equals 48? And if I divide by 4, I'm going to get S equals 12. Okay, so that I think I'm done, but let's check and make sure I've answered what they said. The directions say find the length of what? Of each piece. I only have the length of the shorter one, right? So the shorter one is 12. How am I supposed to know what the longer one is? Well, look, isn't the longer one 3 times 12? So the longer one would be 36. So that's actually what they were asking. So if you had stopped on this one at S equals 12, you wouldn't have completely answered the question. So that's kind of why that number 4 is up there. You know, before you move on, make sure you've answered the question. Okay, look at number 3. In a recent year, the U.S. House of Representatives had a total of 435 Democrats and Republicans. So altogether, 435. There were 31 more Democrats. There were 31 more Democratic representatives than Republicans. Find the number of representatives from each party. Okay, so here's what I'm going to think about to myself. I know that however many Democrats plus however many Republicans equals a total of 435. Okay? So I need to make one of these be my variable. And it doesn't really matter. I don't know. Let's see. I'm going to call this is my Democrats. This is my Republicans. This is just for us to think about. So one of those is an X. There were 31 more Democratic representatives than Republicans. So how about if I say that my Republicans is X, then what would the Democrats be? Well, if there are 31 more than Republicans, wouldn't the Democrats be X plus 31? So my equation that I have, if you look at the picture, is going to be this plus this equals 435. Well, look at that. If I do my addition, isn't that like saying 2x plus 31 equals 435? So now I have an equation that I can solve. Subtract your 31. 2x equals 204. Divide by 2. X equals 102. So I'm done solving. Have I answered the question? It says, find the number of representatives from what? Each party. All right. So X was which one? Wasn't X Republicans? So the Republicans was 102. So what is the Democrats? Well, aren't the Democrats going to be X plus 31? So 102 plus 31 would be 133. So this is what they actually asked me for. Okay, so let's look at number 4. If the 2 walls of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. were connected, an isosceles right triangle would be formed. I know it's hard to tell, but here's one wall of the memorial. Here's another wall of the memorial. They're saying, hey, if you were to connect this one, this side, like this, if you were connected into a triangle, it would be an isosceles, what did they say? Isosceles triangle. What does isosceles mean? Doesn't that mean 2 sides are equal? So just looking at my picture, it seems like these are the 2 sides that are equal, doesn't it? Okay, so I'll call both of those X. They're the same. The measure of the third angle is 97.5, more than the measure of either of the other two angles. Okay, well, let's do this. Maybe instead of calling the sides x, maybe I call the angles. So which are the two angles that would be equal? Well, if these are the two sides that are equal, doesn't that mean the opposite angles are the ones that are equal? So these two angles would be the same. And they're saying that the third angle right in here is 97.5. So this angle right in here is 97.5. Okay, 97.5. So find the measure of the third angle. Well, do I have an equation? Well, gonna dig deep. What do I know about all three angles in a triangle? Don't I know that all three angles in a triangle have to total 180? So in other words, the angle that's x plus the other angle that's x plus the third angle, which is 97.5, all have to total 180. So now I have an equation. So if I add my x's, 2x plus 97.5 equals 180. Right, subtract your 97.5, so 2x equals, let's see, I don't know, what is that going to be? Is that 81.5? I'm just whipping that off real quick. Let's see, 170, 899, I think it's going to be 82.5. Sorry. Again, you can use your calculator. Last step, divide by 2, so x equals 41.25. Again, you can use your calculator. All right, makes me think I'm done. Have I answered the question? It says, oh, you know what I did? I did this whole thing wrong. Can we just erase that whole thing? Okay, so sorry about that, but I see what I did wrong. Maybe instead of erasing the whole thing, I can just kind of show you where we went wrong. So yeah, we have the two angles that are up here are both the x, but then let's see if I can get a color that stands out a little bit. Maybe this one will. So the two angles they gave us up here were the x. But then right here, do you see where it says the measure of the third angle is 97.5? And when I was reading it, I just stopped right there and said the third angle was 97.5. But notice it keeps going. It says 97.5 more than the measure of either of the other two sides. So they're saying this angle is not just 97.5, but it's 97.5 more than, so plus, the other angle. So when I added them all up, I had my first angle of x, my second angle of x, but my third angle was not just 97.5, but rather it was 97.5 plus x. So that means when I add all this up, instead of having 2x plus 97.5, I would have to add up all three of them. So really it's a 3x plus 97.5. So when I subtract my 97.5, I'm still going to have the 82.5, but now I'm dividing by 3. And if I divide the 82.5 by 3, 82.5 divided by 3, that's going to give me 27.5. So x is 27.5. Sorry about that. So did we answer the question? It says, find the measure of the third angle. Well, this is the one they're calling the third angle. So the other two were 27.5. So doesn't that mean the third angle is going to be the 27.5 plus the 97.5? So whatever you get for that is going to be the answer to what they're asking about the third angle. Okay, so let's look at number 5. Last one. This one says, some states have a single area code for the entire state. All right, when I've looked at this before, I realized that some students don't really know what we mean when we say area code. Well, you know how for your phone number, you've got the first 3 numbers of your phone number? That's called the area code. If you first got your phone when you lived in Texas, then probably the first three numbers are either 972 or 214 or maybe even 817, usually 972, because those are all Texas area codes. But different states have different area codes, so it just kind of depends on where you got your phone. Anyway, so we're talking about an area code. It says, two such states have area codes that are consecutive odd integers. So if you think about the first three numbers of your area code, this is saying that they are consecutive odd integers, like 357 or 579 or I guess 135, something like that. It says if the sum of these integers is 1208, find the two area codes. So two such states have area codes that are consecutive odd integers. All right, so what that means is